Now, you said that when you first encountered this material, it made you physically ill and also terrified for the safety of your children, but then also it necessitated you seeking um, help, I suppose, or aid. I mean, I've worked with people who've had post-traumatic stress disorder. Generally, what happens is that tragedy is not enough to give someone post-traumatic stress disorder, even if it's rather severe. It has to be a combination of tragedy and malevolence. And the real trauma comes as a consequence of contact with evil, with malevolence. And what people generally have to do in order to recover from that is to develop a rather profound philosophy of evil. And, a religious faith in its most fundamental essence is a philosophy of good and evil. It does detail out the heart of darkness among human beings, point out to people, this is particularly, although not uniquely true of the Christian tradition, but particularly true, that capacity for evil lurks in the heart of everyone, and that our fundamental moral obligation as we sojourn here on earth is to overcome that proclivity within and also to stand up against it in the external world. And so you said you received some aid after you had been exposed to this first set of videos. What is it about the way you looked at the world that had to change in order for you to adapt to what you were encountering?
Well, I had to come to grips with an idea that I had never been confronted with before, that there are people, and not a few, but millions of people, only millions of pedophiles could justify a demand of millions of child exploitation material, videos, and so forth. The first person you see arrested in the movie is a real person named Ernst Lupolszczynski in Sound of Freedom. He had over 2 million pieces of child rape material in his house. So to be confronted with the reality that there are people on this planet, and like I said, not a few, but millions, who want to indulge in watching 5-year-old children be raped and sexually assaulted in ways that, and I'm sorry to be so raw, but I feel comfortable with you, Dr. Peterson, but to watch children's bodies actually break in the act of sexual assault, acts that your mind couldn't conjure up if you tried to conjure it up, and that it's real, that is so shocking to the system. It changes your life forever. I tell people, if I feel like I've had a million holes burned into my brain because I've watched thousands of hours of that kind of material. Not only watch it, and I love the scene that Jim depicts where that's very real. I can't watch the movie, but the movie's very good. The movie doesn't show any of this, by the way. It doesn't show anything like this. I don't want people to run away and be scared, but you see the scene where the camera flashes a close up into Jim's eyes. And that was me for 10 years, not only watching, but writing it in details for the court to see, for the prosecutors to see, and raising children at the same time that are the very same age. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, I have 9 children. At the time I left the government at 6. And so I can always identify the age of a child with one of my own children. And what my mind was almost automatically doing is I would superimpose my own children's faces and persons onto these children. And that led to the PTSD, I'll be honest, and almost a paranoia about what would happen to my children and watching my children. And I've come a long ways, and I'm able to deal with it, but I was determined never to quit. And so I just sought more help, and I won't quit. So.
Okay, so Tim, I'm going to walk you through what I know about how people turn into the sort of pedophile that you find you and everyone else, I suppose, or virtually everyone else, finds so mysterious. So I'm going to refer first to the story of Cain and Abel because it actually puts its finger on the process in a stunning manner. So what happens in that story is that 2 different pathways to adaptation are detailed out, and they become the cardinal pathways of adaptation that characterize the whole human race, immersed as it is from that point onward in history instead of in the Garden of Eden. And one is the pathway of Cain, and the other is the pathway of Abel. Now, Abel makes high quality sacrifices. He's all in, right? He puts himself on the line and he does the real thing. And as a consequence, he finds favor with God, and his sacrifices are rewarded. He does well and everyone loves him and he thrives. And Cain, his sacrifices are not of the same quality. He tries to cut the corners and to pull the wool over his eyes and God's eyes and everyone else's eyes. And as a consequence, his sacrifices are rejected. And instead of cluing the hell in and waking up and taking responsibility for his failure, he decides that he's going to call out God for creating a cosmos that's cosmically unfair and unjust. And the evidence for that is Cain's failure and Abel's success. And so he has a little chat with God, and he basically calls him out and says, I'm breaking myself in half here and nothing's going my way. And Abel gets everything he wants. And, how dare you make a cosmos so radically unjust and improper? And why don't you just straighten yourself out? And God says, if you did well, you would be rewarded for it, and you should look to yourself. And then he says something even worse. And this is very subtle because it's complicated to understand it unless you look at multiple translations or potentially the original Hebrew, which I can't read, but I read the multiple translations. God says to Cain, the spirit of sin crouches at your doorstep like a sexually aroused predatory animal, and you have invited it in to have its way with you.